Welcome to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson, Executive Director of the Commonwealth Policy Center. Governor Andy Beshear's recent mask mandate for all Kentucky schools was struck down by federal Judge William Bertelsman, who in particular struck down the mandate as it applied to Catholic schools in the Covington Diocese. Bertelsman said the executive branch cannot simply ignore laws passed by the duly elected representatives of the citizens of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Therein lies tyranny. Strong words from that federal judge. Now, since that ruling, the Kentucky Supreme Court upheld the legislature's authority to restrict the governor's emergency powers. Governor Beshear rescinded his executive order, and he is expected to call a special session where he will be working with legislative leaders to craft a COVID policy to deal with this second wave of the Delta variant. Joining us is Kentucky's Speaker of the House, David Osborne. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. Good to be with you.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Speaker Osborne, if did the governor, by any chance, contact you or other legislative leaders before he issued that mandate at the beginning of the school year, just a couple of weeks ago, seeking your input, seeking any advice, or?
I can't speak for who he may have or didn't speak to, or did or did not speak to, Richard, but he didn't talk to me personally. So I can't speak to anybody else that he may or may not have talked to.
I understand. In response to the Kentucky Supreme Court ruling, Governor Beshear's communications director, Crystal Staley, said that the court's order will dissolve Kentucky's entire state of emergency for the COVID-19 pandemic. She went on to further comment there that made it sound like nobody else other than the governor can appropriately respond to this second wave. What's your response to that? You're in a place right now where the legislature passed House Bill 1, Senate Bill 1, House Joint Resolution 77, which limits the governor's emergency powers, limits the length of an emergency by which the governor can rule without legislative input. What's your response to that?
Well, I guess on the simplest terms, Richard, she would be accurate, because the legislation that we passed during the session, while it's been enjoined, the timeframes do not necessarily automatically get extended. So under the terms of the bills that we passed and the resolutions that we passed, effectively, upon the lifting of the injunction, which has to be within 20 days of the ruling from the Supreme Court, those orders do expire, and so does the state of emergency, back to the date which was specified in the legislation that we passed. There would be multiple effective dates of that, but on most of the executive orders, any of the executive orders that we extended, those were extended for 90 days. So they would have extended 90 days beyond the date that we passed them. And then the state of emergency, the same. So in its purest sense, she is accurate that the court did effectively end the state of emergency. That does not mean, to your point, obviously, that we don't have the ability and the authority. Well, we have the ability. We don't have the authority to call ourselves into session, but we certainly have the ability, once in session, to extend anything that we see fit and to pass anything new, assuming that it's on the call that the governor issues, anything new to address the circumstances.
A special session does appear to be imminent. This is interesting because the courts have really forced, if I could put it this way, forced the hand of the governor to work with legislative leaders like yourself and Senate President Stivers. Are you allowed to say if you've been talking with the governor? And of course, some context here is that traditionally there will be agreement before a special session is called. There should be some kind of agreement between legislative leaders and the governor. Are you able to say if you've been talking to the governor now?
We have had a number of conversations, Richard, and at least 3 in-person meetings now with the governor and with his staff to talk about places where we do have agreement. As you can imagine, there are some places where we don't have agreement. I think that by the time we come in here, we will have at least a framework around which we agree upon. That doesn't mean that he will not ask us to consider some things that he will not ultimately agree, or that we will not ultimately agree to. And he may put those things on the call. There may be some things that we ask him to put on the call that he will not. And so we won't be able to deliberate those things. The Constitution is pretty clear in a special session, excuse me, tongue-tied, in a special session, you can only take up those items that are specifically spelled out in the proclamation for the special session. So if there's anything that we want to consider, he would have to put them on the call for us to actually consider them.
On the recent Kentucky Tonight program, President Pro Tem of the Senate, David Givens, indicated that there were 4 pages of policy considerations that the governor shared with his branch, with his body. A couple of those areas of agreement that were pointed out were to limit price gouging by businesses during the pandemic. Another one was emergency licensure for out-of-state healthcare workers that are coming into Kentucky to help. And another one would allow local school districts to determine their own mask policy. Are there any other areas of agreement that you're able to share?
There are. I mean, obviously, we all tend to get caught up in focusing on those executive orders that we don't like. That's only human nature, and paying no attention to those that don't either directly impact us or that we don't mind. There are executive orders that will extend continuing education requirements or certain professions that have to meet in person for the continuing education. For example, there are executive orders that will allow for the reemployment of retired individuals for certain situations, particularly teachers, emergency workers, hospital workers. Executive orders that will allow for the suspension of licensing requirements for healthcare professionals to travel across state lines, for example. Those are types of things that really are important in battling this health situation, this health emergency. They are important things to allow people to continue to function normally or to help battle the virus itself. So those are things that really do need to be extended. And I think most of those things we are in agreement on, much like we passed House Joint Resolution 77 back during the session, where there were a number of things. I think it was 36 or 38 orders that we extended. We extended many more than we didn't extend, actually, in House Joint Resolution 77. And those were things that we had almost unanimous buy-in from our caucus and passed, I think, without a dissenting vote. So many of those items, there's absolute agreement on. Again, the things that we agree on are pretty innocuous at this point. And then he's thrown out some items that he would like for us to consider, some new issues that he would like for us to consider, to revisit some other issues that he would like for us to consider. And we've actually had some members of our own respective caucuses, both in the House and the Senate, that have been working on some policy initiatives of their own that they would like to consider. So it has been a bit of a collaborative effort so far.
Good. The numbers of NTI non-traditional instruction has reverted back to 10 days maximum for the school year. Now, it's about 23 school districts have had to close because of this recent wave. That's according to the Courier Journal, and that was a couple days ago. It might even be higher. Is one of the considerations to extend NTI for those districts that have had to close?
There is some discussion of extending NTI. There's obviously some people that have real concerns with extending the number of NTI days, simply because I think everybody believes that the best place that kids can be is back in schools and in classrooms. So I think that there's certainly understanding of the problem. I think that just about everybody in the legislature understands the problem of these kind of very difficult quarantine restrictions that if one student tests positive, then in many cases it snowballs into having to close an entire school down, and that is that's not a practical way to deal with this situation. So I think, while I'm not going to say that we're necessarily going to create more NTI days, I think that will be debated over the coming days. I do think that there will be some effort to help school districts deal with those situations, and yet at the same time stay in person in school without having to close an entire school system down or an entire school down. But some ways that some flexibility that they need to be able to deal with those situations that I think that most people will be pretty agreeable to.
David, and I'll close with this. I guess the most challenging question, perhaps the most contentious issue, is the statewide mask mandate in the schools. I think what triggered a visceral response for many people was that it extended to private schools. It reached kids as young as 2 and 3 years old, which is difficult to keep a mask on them. It appears that the legislature's moving in the direction and going to maintain that direction of allowing local school districts to determine what's best for themselves. Are you able to speak to that, to their own situation and what would work best for their own district?
You know, I'm not going to speak conclusively yet, Richard. We're gonna have a caucus meeting with our members to talk about a lot of these issues yet this afternoon. So I'm not going to speak in absolutes, but I tend to believe that there's no real enthusiasm in our caucus or in the Senate to continue a statewide mandate. I would be very, very surprised if you see that.
Okay, very good. Our thoughts.
I will tell you that the governor has continued to make his pitch for that, and I don't think he's making it any secret. And certainly, I think it's a discussion worthy of having, but I don't think we've made it much of a secret that there's probably not the support for it in the House or in the Senate.
One last question on this that comes to mind, and that's mandatory vaccinations for school personnel. Of course, it's been discussed for healthcare workers. That is also contentious. Is that an issue that's being discussed in the special session?
It has not come up as of yet. The governor has not brought it up. There's talk of things that we could do to encourage it, to incentivize it, but I've heard no discussion of, with any enthusiasm anyway, in the affirmative of having any vaccine mandates. I think that would be a very, very unusual position for the legislature or for any governmental unit to take, and I would doubt very seriously that you will see anything that will resemble that.
Okay. Speaker David Osborne, thank you so much for joining us. God bless you and the legislature as you will meet soon to deal with this second wave of COVID. I pray for you and pray that you'll be able to work with the governor and come up with some policies that are good for all of us across the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Richard. Those are admirable prayers and much appreciated, and appreciate that thought, and always a pleasure to be with you.
All right. Thank you. God bless.
Yes, sir. You too.